Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, today we have good news and bad news. The good news is that our Democratic colleagues are finally discovering that the Chinese communists are not our friends. They are finally acknowledging that the Chinese communists are murdering, torturing, oppressive tyrants. And our Democratic colleagues are likewise discovering that Hong Kong is a beacon for democracy, a beacon for liberty. That is indeed good news. The bad news is the bill that they have put forth is not designed to do anything about it. This is not a Hong Kong bill. It is instead a Democratic messaging bill because House Democrats made, I think, a cynical decision to try to exploit the crisis in Hong Kong to advance their long-standing goals on changing our immigration laws. It is not news to anyone who has been watching the political battles of recent years to discover that our Democratic colleagues embrace open borders, that when it comes to illegal immigration, their preference is to make all immigration legal. This bill advances that long-time partisan political agenda that the Democrats have. When it comes to standing up for Communist China, for 8 years I have led the fight in this Senate to stand up to Communist China. China is, I believe, the single greatest geopolitical threat facing the United States for the next century. In October of last year, I traveled to Hong Kong as part of a Friends and Allies tour throughout Asia, met with the Hong Kong dissidents, these brave young students standing in the streets, standing for freedom, standing up against Chinese tyrants. I did a satellite interview on an American Sunday show from Hong Kong, dressed in all black, in solidarity with those protesters, because Hong Kong today is, as I've said many times, the new Berlin. It is the front line in the battle against communist tyranny. This bill, however, is not designed to fix that problem. Right now, today, under current law, individuals in Hong Kong are already eligible to become refugees under our immigration law. In fact, in July, President Trump explicitly expanded the number of refugee slots available and allocated to Hong Kong. This bill, instead, is designed, and it would dramatically lower the standards for both refugee and asylum status to the point where individuals would qualify even if they cannot establish an individualized and credible fear of persecution. The senator from Connecticut just listed that as a virtue of this bill, that no longer would you have to establish a credible fear of persecution. Instead, this bill would dramatically lower that standard. There's no reason to lower that standard, and there is particular risk when doing so we know would be used by the Chinese communists to send even more Chinese spies into the United States. Now, the senator from Connecticut assured us, well, don't worry, we'll do a background check. Well, Mr. President, the last I checked, when the Chinese communist government sends spies into our country, they're quite willing to concoct a bogus background portfolio of materials. Who do you think the Chinese government would be seeing coming in? We just recently had news of Chinese spies targeting members of Congress, targeting prominent Democrats. This is an espionage threat America faces, of our adversaries taking advantage of our laws and targeting our leadership. The truth also is that China has confiscated passports, and I'm told stop issuing exit visas to persons deemed problematic. As a result, China is highly unlikely to let actual dissidents leave Hong Kong. So this bill isn't directed to help them. But I will say this. We urgently need to have a real, substantive, bipartisan conversation about countering the Chinese Communist Party, about defending the United States of America, about standing up and winning this battle. This bill doesn't advance that objective, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give our Democratic colleagues the opportunity to actually support legislation that would stand up to China. And so momentarily, I'm going to ask unanimous consent for one bill and discuss a second bill that I also later intend to ask unanimous consent to pass. But first, I object.